was late fall when I found myself alone in my house for the weekend. My parents were out of town, and I had the entire place to myself. At 27, I wasn't exactly new to being alone, but there's something about an empty house at night that always gives you an uneasy feeling, no matter how old you are. I had a routine when I was alone: lock all the doors, check the windows, and leave a few lights on, just in case. It wasn't that I was paranoid, but I liked feeling secure. My house wasn't huge, just a modest two-story suburban home at the edge of town. Behind the house was a patch of dense woods that led to an old, rarely used hiking trail. In the daylight, the woods were peaceful, but at night they became something else entirely, a wall of black with unknown sounds and shifting shadows. It was Friday evening when things started to feel off. After a long day of work, I made myself dinner, watched some TV, and then decided to head upstairs. I had just turned off the living room lights and started making my way up when I heard a soft creak from the kitchen. I paused, my foot halfway on the step. The house was old and had its fair share of creaky spots, but this sound was different. It was subtle, like someone trying to move quietly. I told myself it was just the house settling, shrugged it off, and continued upstairs. But when I reached the second floor and glanced down the hallway toward my bedroom, I froze. The light in my room was on. I was sure I had turned it off earlier. I stood there for a moment, staring, trying to remember if maybe I had just forgotten. But my gut told me something wasn't right. I slowly walked toward the bedroom, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, my heart began to race. I scanned the room. Nothing seemed out of place. My bed was made, my desk was cluttered with the usual papers and books, and the window was closed. I reached over and turned off the light, but as I did, I felt a strange sense of being watched, like someone was right behind me. I spun around. The hallway was empty. I chalked it up to nerves. I mean, being alone in a big, empty house can mess with your head. I closed the door, locked it, and tried to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something moving downstairs. It wasn't a creak this time. It was more deliberate, like footsteps, heavy ones. I lay there, listening, hoping I was dreaming. But then I heard it again, a slow, methodical thud of someone walking from the kitchen toward the living room. My heart pounded in my chest. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. Whoever it was, they were taking their time. My mind raced with possibilities. Did someone break in? Why hadn't I heard them? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. As I whispered to the operator what was happening, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A faint whistle. It was coming from downstairs, and it was getting closer. The operator stayed on the line as I locked myself in the bathroom. She assured me the police were on their way, but I wasn't sure they'd make it in time. I could still hear the slow, deliberate footsteps moving around downstairs. Then they stopped. I held my breath, waiting. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the front door. My heart leaped into my throat. The police had arrived. I heard them shouting as they entered the house, telling whoever was inside to come out. There was no response. After a few minutes, one of the officers came upstairs and knocked on the bathroom door, telling me it was safe. When I came out, they explained they had searched the entire house. No one was there. I was relieved, but confused. How could that be? I had heard someone walking around. They must have missed something, but the officers insisted that the house was clear. They offered to stay until I felt comfortable, but I declined, figuring it was all just some bizarre coincidence. They left, and I tried to go back to sleep. But that feeling, the sense that someone was still in the house, wouldn't go away. The next morning, I did a full sweep of the house myself. Everything seemed normal, though I couldn't shake the memory of those footsteps. I spent the day trying to distract myself, but the unease stayed with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual, determined to sleep through the night. Around midnight, I woke up again, this time to an odd scratching noise. It was faint, barely audible, but definitely there. I sat up and listened. The sound was coming from inside the house, underneath me. My bedroom was on the second floor, and the noise seemed to be coming from directly below, in the basement. I didn't want to go down there. Who would? But the more I listened, the clearer it became. Someone or something was in the basement, scraping against the walls. It wasn't like an animal trapped or trying to claw its way out. It sounded intentional. I grabbed my flashlight and crept downstairs. The door to the basement was shut, but the scratching continued. I stood at the door, my heart in my throat, and hesitated. Should I open it? What if someone had been hiding in my house this whole time? I unlocked the door and swung it open. The noise stopped. I stood there, frozen, staring into the pitch-black basement. I pointed my flashlight down the stairs, but couldn't see much beyond the first few steps. Summoning every ounce of courage, I started descending. Halfway down, the scratching started again. This time, it was closer. I stopped in my tracks, aiming the flashlight toward the sound, and that's when I saw it. At the far corner of the basement, a small panel in the wall was slightly ajar. It looked like an old access panel for plumbing, but it was large enough for a person to squeeze through. I approached cautiously, the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the dusty floor. When I reached the panel, I pulled it open, expecting to find nothing but old pipes or maybe some insulation. Instead, there was a narrow passage leading into the darkness. My heart raced. This passage wasn't supposed to be here. I could see scratch marks along the walls inside, fresh and deep, as though someone had been crawling through it. But more horrifying was what I found just inside the entrance. A blanket, a half-empty water bottle, and food wrappers. Someone had been living here. Someone had been hiding in my house for days, maybe even weeks. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The noises, the lights turning on, the strange feeling of being watched. It wasn't my imagination. There was an intruder, and they had been inside the house the whole time. I bolted upstairs, locked the basement door, and called the police again. This time, they brought more officers and thoroughly searched the house, including the hidden passage. They found traces of someone living there, but no sign of the person themselves. The police told me they'd station a car outside my house for the next few nights, just in case. But the thought that someone had been so close, watching me, moving around in the shadows of my own home, was too much to bear. That was 3 months ago. I haven't stayed in the house since. Every night I wonder if they're still out there, if they ever really left at all.